Welcome everybody to the Open-E webinar. Today's topic is a topic that we're seeing a lot in the tickets that are coming in, and we wanted to address them, although it could be very vast what we're talking about in the voluminous amount of areas for tuning and performance issues. But we found out these are the main core ones that we're commonly seeing. So basically the storage solutions to troubleshooting performance issues with DSS V6 are going to be related to usually what we're finding out is verify all firmware is updated on the array controller and also the update on DSS V6 system. So you want to make sure you have the latest version because we do update the drivers, and a lot of time the drivers need the firmware updated as well. We're seeing this with Adaptic and LSI in many respects. Also, we found a lot of cases where customers are not updating their firmware on the motherboards, and there are significant updates, especially with some of the super micro motherboards that are out there in the field today. Then what we're going to do is we're going to check all the NIC connections and performing at proper speeds. Personally, I've caught many scenarios like this. Our engineers have caught it, and once we find it in the logs, or we can go into the console screen, and I'll show you how to do that. So if these are some of the things when you're out there working with your customers or yourself and you have this DSS V6 in your environment, you've just installed it and you're not getting the speeds that you really should be getting, these are some of the common things that we're going to be checking with. Ping node. Believe it or not, when you start reaching over many milliseconds on the time to live from the ping, that is an indicator as well. So that's something I'll show you in the console tools. A lot of you already know how to ping, but this is just a general overview for those who should do these checks, and they don't take that long, really. So you should be able to identify where the issue is, and that's basically what we're trying to do is hunt down where that needle in the haystack is actually at, so you can save your time and the customer's time and get on with the things that you normally should be doing. We're going to briefly go into reviewing the log file from the DSS V6. This is what we do, and I'll show you how quickly we identify exactly and pinpointing the areas where the firmware is, the performance issues, and also to check the array controller to make sure the right cache is enabled. So I just want to let everybody know today's the 15th, 2011, and my name is Todd Maxwell. I'm head of Director of Technical Sales and Support that many of you know. So you have DSS installed on the system. You really want to make sure that you have the latest and greatest version of DSS V6. A lot of you know how to do this. It's very simple. You can check the latest version right here on the build number. You can go to maintenance and software update, download the ISO image, or use the checker online. When you use the checker online, be sure that you have internet access so that way you can go out and retrieve the latest update. And then if you have the ISO image, or you can download it from our website, you can go ahead and use this browse function and upload. Typically at that point, once you're up to date, while you're dropping the system down, verify that the motherboard is actually up to date. So here, unable to connect to server. That's due to because I'm having a different gateway and I'm not set up for it. So for your condition, you want to really definitely check all your firmwares and be able to test that you are able to get to the internet. Very simply, all you have to do is make sure that you do have the proper gateway. Just go to Setup, Interfaces, and then here you'll see the interfaces coming up on the left side, and verify whichever NIC that you're using as your main NIC, and verify that you have the proper gateway. Okay, and once you've updated the firmware, and you've updated DSS V6, now the real test is really to perform where the bottleneck could be. So typically before you deploy a system, or if a system is deployed and it's already being used, there's several ways you can do this. So for example, I have a volume group here that's going to be displayed in just a second. And then what we're going to see is the volumes and the units what we're going to have here. So as we're going to have unit S00, S001, and S002. Now if you notice, S000 is already in use. Okay, so I already have, let's say, data on there. In this case, all I'm going to be able to do is pretty much perform read values. So we're going to performance test and show you. In order to do the right values, to verify the performance value of your volume, then we're going to have to use what's called the performance disk test in the console screen. I'm going to take you there in just a second. But first I want you to understand that what we have here on S001 is from an LSI array controller. Now, the reasons also follow for also Firmware, Adaptic, Arica, and the others that are out there. Make sure that you have the latest firmware. Today, I just did it simply just to show you I don't have the latest firmware update on this LSI array controller. I am using the 9265-8i, and I am one version behind. And I did that purposely to show everybody some of the procedures. So let's look. If I've got this unit S001, which is only, I'm using SAS 15K drives from Seagate. Let's take a look at them. If I go to Setup, Hardware Array, LD1 is the S0001, which is my SAS drives that I'm using, which is only, it's a very small volume that I created. And let's go down the bottom here. So it's a RAID 5. Very small because I have 70 gig drives, and what I want to show here is that on the top I have write through. We cannot stress enough how many times we catch this in the logs and the performance. Let's take a look at exactly what happens when you're using write through, because typically that is the default if you don't have what's called a BBU or battery backup unit. Let's take a look. We're going to pull up my PuTTY session. PuTTY is used a lot. You can configure your access to what's called remote console access. You go to Setup Administrator. Maybe I should show that right now. That way you don't have to walk up to the server itself. You can be remotely away, and you can access the console screen from the DSS. If I go to Setup Administrator, then scroll all the way down, right here it says Remote Console Access. You can set your port value. Default is port 22,222, and of course any password. I just make mine admin for simplicity reasons. Okay, let's blow up the screen a little bit more so everybody can see it. So once I access the console screen for DSS, you can hit F1 for functions to understand where some of the functions are. Where I'm going to be going is the Control-Alt-W right here to run hardware configurations. And then we're going to go into Control-Alt-N for the network. And then after that, we're going to run Control-T for console tools to run the ping command. Let's first do Control-Alt-W. So here I'm going to enter the admin password. And we're going to go right down here where it says System Benchmarks. Now, if you remember, we were talking about S0001, which is where my SAS 15K drives are on a RAID 5, and it does not have the write cache enabled. So the only way I can do the write test is to make sure that the volume has not been formatted. If it has been formatted, I won't be able to perform the write test, only the read test. So for the write test, you're probably going to have to use IO meter. We do have a site on our blog. What are the best settings for IO meter, how to test with IO meter. But this is just a real quick and fast way to be able, before you deploy the system, to verify if you're really getting the performance. Let's take a look. Now this takes a second. This is going to run some tests. The read test, by the way, is a little bit faster. The write test takes an extra 10 seconds as it does this. So, and there's no difference whether you're having the SAS or SATA or different RAID values on the performance of being able to get the performance test from the write test. You can also perform multiple tests at the same time by selecting S001 that we had. We could have also done for S002, and it would have provided us the results. Now look what we have here. That's terrible. So we're talking about the speed almost of a USB 2. And we see this a lot. So when customers say, why am I getting terrible performance? Well, if we're getting speeds like that, that tells us we got an issue here. So what we asked is for the logs. To be able to find that out, what we do is typically the engineers will go to status, they'll ask you to go to status, hardware, functionality, right in DSS, and here you can download the logs. So when you download the logs, you're going to come up and have what we have here is a lot of log setting files. You're going to open it up. I'm using WinRAR, by the way. It looks like we're having some sound issues, and it looks like a lot of people are asking if it's video stopping. Let me know if you guys are okay, and I can pause the recording and we can do a sound check and verification. Here we've opened up the log file. I use WinRAR. There's a lot of other programs that you can use. But when you use the DSS V6 and you open up the log file, you can see there's really a lot of logs here. To verify that when you're getting the performance issues and you send in a ticket and say, my performance is not there, what we do is when we send in those logs, the first file we go to is this dmessage2.log file. Let's take a look at the dmessage2.log file. Here, now I profuse apologies on the font size, and I'm see if I can blow that up a little bit for you. It's a little bit too small. Let's see if we can bring up this to 14. Maybe that'll be better for you all. So here, this is the LSI 9265-8i. And what you'll see right here is the write cache right down here is disabled. You'll typically, once we see that, we ask you to enable the write cache. So now let's go ahead and enable the write cache for S0001 for the SAS drives, and let's look at the performance values then. Let's go back to the DSS V6. We're going to go to Setup and then Hardware Array. We're going to take a look at the logical drive 1, which is where S001 is located. And remember, we saw that it was write through in the beginning. A lot of installations have defaulted to write through because you don't have a battery backup unit. I don't have one. Now, the question is, can I still set it to write cache or write back for this? Absolutely. Now, I've talked to LSI engineers on this, and they stated as long as you have a good UPS system, an ability, maybe a backup generator, and you know that this is not going to be down for lengths of period of time, you have a good fault tolerant system, maybe a switching system. If your power failure fails and switch to battery backup, from battery backup to generator, then yes, you can go ahead and do this. So let's apply the write back. And now let's perform our performance test with the write test on the performance disk tools that we have here. So that was the state with write through. Now let's look at with the write test for S001. Significant difference. So we went from 24 megs to 395 megs. That's almost over 11 times the performance value. So if that doesn't do anything to let you know, really to check out your settings on your array controller, whether it be a Firmware, a lot of times you'll see for balance or for performance, set up for performance, a lot of the firmwares now have updated into the Firmware GUI to, are you sure you want to do this because you don't have a battery backup unit? I encourage you to have a battery backup unit, but also know there are cases when the battery backup unit is not fully charged, it will default to write through. So you will see a performance hit there. So if you look, even if we do the read test, and we can now see that the existing volume on VG00 can perform a read test, but we won't be able to do a write test because the volume's already been formatted. And in that case, then we recommend to use IO meter, and there is a blog on our site. We can look at what settings to use to get the best performance values. So that is just a real quick way to verify if your RAID controller is performing properly or not. Now let's look. Typically you want to, before you do this, kind of skip a little bit, but we want to show you, does your RAID controller have the latest firmware? Well, what do you do if you need to find out? If you go back into the log file, when we download it from DSS, there's a file, look for raid_info.txt. Now, this won't be in the older versions, it'll be in the last several releases of 5794. So please be aware, if you have an older version of DSS V6, it will not be in there, and you're going to have to look in the test.log to be able to find that, or the LSI logs here. This really simplifies it. We've modified it a little bit. If we click on this and view file, we could see that the firmware package that we have here is 21.01-011. And so you also have below the dates and so forth and other information that are helpful. So very simply, on all RAID controllers, when you do a firmware upgrade, it is recommended to do a restart, or it won't take an effect. There's nothing we can do about that. That is with the RAID controller vendor. I brought up a Mega RAID Storage Manager window here. I'm using Windows 2008. I installed the MSM, and just wanted to show you there are several ways to update the firmware. And again, you can see the firmware again right in here. If you look on the right side of this panel here, you'll see 21.0-0111. And to update the firmware, very simply, you can do it right here by right-clicking on the for the LSI, that is. 3Ware is different on their GUI, but you can upload controller firmware, browse the file. We have here for LSI firmware, and of course we have the update to update it. And you confirm it and say OK. So then once that is completed, then you want to go ahead and reboot the DSS V6 system. And there's also, you can do this also into the tools and update it from there. So please update your firmware, then verify in the logs here under the raid_info.txt to verify that you do have the latest firmware package. Then perform your read-write test from the console screen. Okay, now let's move on to performing on what we see on networks. So once we know that the RAID controller is performing fine, it possibly could be a network condition. Typically, we see most of the conditions and most of the performance issues reside between the disk and the controller and the setup of the RAID controller. Once you have that resolved, then you can move forward into the NICs. Typically, to find information about the NICs, we want to use the test.log. Maybe I should start from the beginning here. We look right here. Test.log is what we're looking at mostly for the NICs. You can also get read performance values of the RAID array. So let's take a look at it. I probably want to bring up the font a little bit more. Let's go ahead and try to make it 18, see if that helps. And then what we're going to do is just to show you that I'm going to scroll down real quick, bear with me because there's a lot of information here. But what you want to look for is what's called the HD param. So it's basically just giving a read output here. So if you look right here for SDB, which would be our S001 RAID array that we've created, which is would be our volume group VG001 or VG01. Here you can see the read performance. So you can get that right in the beginning. Now for the NICs, what we're going to do is go to the ifconfig section. So if we scroll down right here, go to the ifconfig. Here we go, ifconfig-a. Here we can verify, are we performing adequately? Are there packet errors? Are there drop packets? Here's where you would get that information. Now, RX would be receiving. A lot of times we will see many drop packets right in here, simulating into the hundreds or thousands. And if it's exceedingly more, then you really do have a serious issue. We also want to verify the jumbo frames or MTU values. Yes, by default 1500 is the default, but we have seen some incorrect values, especially when you're bonding. If ETH0 and ETH1 are bonded to a bond 0, and ETH1 has a jumbo frame of 1500, but ETH0 has a jumbo frame of 9000 or 9004 or whatever the recommended vendor value is, then you can have some issues. So you want to be really matching those values before you create your bond. So if you are going to use jumbo frames, make sure that you set in the console screen, and I can show you where to do that in just a second. Make sure that you do set them both the same before creating the before you create the bond, and then set your bond mode to the same jumbo frame size. So the other thing is that when you also want to check is the E-tool. Now, E-tool is right above. Here, we can go take a look at all the Ethernet NICs. And here is ETH1. And you want to make sure, what do we see here? What problem do we see? So I did this on purpose because we do see these, and you will catch them as well in many environments. I can't tell you how many times that let's say there's been an update in the network. The network engineers, they're different from the storage engineers. We all know this, especially in big environments. And what we have found out is that the performance is bad. We're going to find out right here in the logs under the E-tool in the test.log. So if we look here, we got a problem. You know, yes, we do have full duplex, but we got 10 megabytes. So if you're asking your virtual machines to perform, they're going to drop, especially when you got a lot of heavy I/O. They're not going to get the response time. You're going to have an issue. So what you want to do is verify your switch or cable. So I've seen many times that there's been bad cables, or the switch has been set for 10 megs for whatever reason, or there is some type of link setting, whatever the network engineers, or there could be a major issue also, or there could be a setup that in the configuration of a switch, somebody may have uploaded and designated that Ethernet port on the switch to be 10 megs or 100 megs instead of a full 1 gig. So that is something you want to look at. If we look at ETH0, it is running at a 1 gig E. So if we were to bond to ETH0 and ETH1, I think we would have a problem. And your customer would have a problem, you would have a performance issue. Let's take a look at the console screen. Again, if you're not sure, just use the F1 help command key that displays all the different functions that you can use. One of the first things we want to do is let's ping. I mean, typically we all know how to ping, but it's really a useful tool to use. I went to Control-Alt-T for tools. Here's my first option to ping. I want to verify that I can ping my router. And immediately you should be able to get a percent value. If you don't and you hang at 10, you have an issue. But you should be fully displayed at 100%. And the value should be coming out something of this value. If you have something that's, the first time to live here is 4.5 seconds, it better be performing better after that. If it's higher and it sustains that way, well, then you may have some issues on your network. And this also is for, you want to ping not only your gateway, but maybe the host system. Maybe there is the VMware server. You want to make sure that you're able to have a clean time to live. The milliseconds are very low. You want to verify that. You want to make sure that I'm hitting my VMware server, and you can see I'm getting excellent performance. That I want to make sure. And I have 0 packet loss down here, if you can see. So now, what do I want to do? Well, after I ping, I know I'm clean on that aspect. Then I want to use Control-Alt-N, which goes into my network interfaces. So we noticed that ETH1 was 10 meg, but we didn't have any drop packets. But let's verify. Here we know it's on. All you want to do is use the cursor key and come over to the info section. And you want to verify that we don't have any drop packets. So this is an immediate information for you. Instead of opening up the logs, you can just do this to verify it relatively quickly. Here you can see the jumbo frame says 1500. I don't have any drop packets that are being received. So from the host side, it's sending me data. I'm not seeing any drop packets, any errors, or any overruns. The TX, if you notice here, that's the packets being sent out from the DSS V6. And here I don't have any drop packets as well. So you want to verify it. But I do have my speed issue. And it's showing at 10 meg, and that tells me I'm going to have a problem. But I am running at a full duplex. And again, if we just exit, hit the escape key, we'll go back to the main menu, and we can look at the each one. Go to info, and here we can see the values, the packets that I'm receiving, and the packets that I'm sending, and I know that I'm running at a 1 gig speed. So those are really quick ways to immediately identify where there could be a performance issue. 90% of the time, we have found out those to be the primary areas, and so I want to share that with you all because our engineer really was hoping that we can put something together for you guys. It's really quick, easy, doesn't take you long to figure it out, and be able to use those steps to help you identify where the problems are at. So once again, make sure that you have your write back enabled for your volumes that you've created, your logical drives from the array controller, whether it be Firmware, Eureka, Adaptic, LSI. And here you can set these. And we also have information. If you click on this information, we tell you about values, write back cache policies, and you can read more information. We also have that on our website. If we go into the Open-E site, we have an advanced search engine. Let's see if we can get some information. Write cache. So here, if I've selected knowledge base because I want to categorize my information here, here's an information that talks about write back mode. I know it's very small for many of you to see, but I can post it right now on the chat window so everybody can go ahead and follow me. And for those who are going to watch the video later on, then I'll basically, if you just follow the video where I wrote write cache into the search engine, you'll be able to have this information. But here's all the information on setting your cache policies for I/O, direct, cached I/O, and different stripe size values. All this is going to be able to help you be able to figure out what values would be best for your array controller. If I go back, there's a lot of information as well I talked about in the beginning of the webinar. Where are the webinars and videos? We did move them. Our site is growing rapidly as we are just really growing too fast, and we're trying to clean it up, and we will categorize these later. But if you go to support, oops, let me do that again, support, and then we go right into libraries, and here you have webcasts and videos. So I'll be able to go ahead and post this in about a week or two after we edit it. Okay, there's a question that says, can you click Control plus on your keyboard to zoom in? Yes, thank you very much. So if we go back to, let's go back to where the right cache is. Thank you very much for that. There we go. Excellent. So here you can see some of the values that are important for your write policies. And again, the link is posted up on the chat window. And again, if you use the search engine, it's very advanced. Back onto Open-E. Here I just wrote write cache, and you'll get a lot of values. Remember, I was talking in the video about a lot of information on our blog settings. We have a great area about that. I'm going to show you. Sorry for this being small, but if you, I'll go ahead and blow the screen up again. Down on the bottom of Open-E site, you'll see a blog. Click on that. I want to take you to an area where Janis Bach, our CTO, did a value on the write cache is important, and also how to set up I/O meter to be able to set up for performance values and the best practices for that. So as we look in here, again, how important is right cache, and we talk about, when you look at this and read the information, you'll find it greatly adding value to you and your customers, especially for performance values. And also there's some information about what to expect from SSDs. This is really good information. Giannis did this one as well. It talks about SSD and also for SAS. But I really want to point out a few practical tips about I/O meter. So I'm going to put this on also on the chat window for many of you to download and click on. So here it's up on the chat window. Please review it because there's some practical tips on how to use it and how to test for your volumes that you've created with DSS V6. Well, thank you everybody for joining the Open-E webinar. I greatly appreciate all your attention and a lot of comments from you. And we'll be seeing you in the next session in a couple of weeks. Take care. Thank you very much for joining the Open-E webinar.